Okay, we're live.
All right, thank you. Good evening. My name is Chantel Wright, and I have the honor of serving as chair of the DC Public Charter School Board. Welcome to this month's board meeting. I'd also like to welcome my fellow board members, Vice Chair Jim Salmon, Treasurer Carissa Stanley Beatty, Secretary Shakora Adamafania, and Leah Cruci. Thank you for your continued commitment to our students and families. As we begin, I want to recognize what many in our community may be experiencing. As we enter the Thanksgiving season, adapt to shorter daylight hours, and work through the lingering impacts of the government shutdown, we're reminded of how much our community depends on their schools. We are constantly reminded that schools are more than places of learning. They are anchors of stability, connection, and support for students and families when the world around them feels uncertain. These reminders of uncertainty and strain underscore just how essential schools and their leaders are to the stability of our city. That's why tonight's theme resonates so strongly. Give thanks, lead well, plan for the future. First, we give thanks to our school leaders. Your dedication, creativity, and deep care provide continuity and support for thousands of students and families. We see your leadership and we truly honor it. Second, we reflect on what it means to lead well as a board. Our responsibility is to steward the public trust by linking accountability, sector planning, and thoughtful policy alignment to stronger outcomes for students. Strong governance builds strong schools, and in doing so, honors the trust that families place in public charter education, a responsibility we as the Public Charter School Board take very seriously. And third, we plan for the future. Our discussions and decisions tonight and throughout the year shape the long-term health of our sector and the opportunities available to every student in DC. As we move through tonight's agenda, we hold these commitments at the center. Thank you for being here and for all you do in service of DC's students and families. Dr. Walker Davis would like to share a few thoughts.
Thank you, Chair Wright, for setting the tone for tonight's meeting. At DC PCSB, we take oversight seriously because strong governance is the foundation of strong schools. Through our focus on academic, financial, and organizational oversight, along with thoughtful policies and sector planning, we ensure that every school not only meets high standards, but continues to grow, improve, and thrive, honoring the trust families place in their public charter school. Tonight, I want to highlight two key items on our agenda. First, we will hold a public hearing on a new policy focused on mergers and acquisitions, or more simply, an opportunity for two or more schools to combine, a step that ensures any changes in school structures strengthen the sector and provide stability for families and students. A merger combines two schools under a single contract or charter, keeping key elements of each program. At the same time, an acquisition moves the school's resources, students, and programs to another school. In all cases, DCPCSB board approval ensures a smooth transition and maintains the continued quality of education for students. And you'll hear more about that proposal shortly. Second, we will share a presentation on charter reviews, renewals, and the role of effective board governance, showing how our oversight connects directly to school performance and long-term success. This is especially important because we've made changes based on feedback from school leaders and staff, as well as this board's reflection from last year's process. This year, we have 12 schools under review and 5 schools in the process of renewal. Staff will highlight the updates, explain the critical role that trustee members play, and walk through the process that we follow. These efforts remind us that governance is not just a responsibility, it's an opportunity to celebrate our school leaders, acknowledge areas where there is room for improvement, support their work, and plan for the future where every DC student has access to a quality, thriving school. Thank you for your commitment and engagement tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Walker Davis. At the beginning of every board meeting, the DC Public Charter School Board hears public testimony related to items on the agenda and listens to testimony for topics not related to any agenda items. Each speaker will have 2 minutes to speak. If you need to make a few additional points, please email your testimony for us to read to public.comment@dcpcsb.org. Public officials who sign up to testify will be allowed to speak for up to 5 minutes. The hand-raising feature has been disabled. As a reminder, all written public comment is available to the public on our website. If you would like to register to provide live testimony or submit a written comment to the board, you can find all testimony registration and submission information on our website under the Public Comment tab at dcpcsb.org. You can also submit your comments to public.comment@dcpcsb.org or call our public line to leave a voicemail testimony at 202-328-2660 and select option 2. As we move through each speaker, Jonah, our Zoom host for the evening, will promote each speaker from the attendee pool and unmute individuals speaking. Let's hear from the 4 individuals who signed up to speak this evening. I'd like to invite to testify before the board Valerie Jablow, Juanita Bug Barber, Lorena Flores, and Kate Godfredson. We will begin with you, Ms. Valerie Jablow.
Hi, can you hear me? Hi, can you hear me?
We can, yes.
Thank you. Thank you. I am Valerie Jablow, a DC resident with questions on Harmony's application that I ask you get answers for before you vote. My written testimony has footnotes to document what I ask here. How is the public supposed to comment on Harmony's purchase of Hope's former property when the only budget template included in Harmony's application literally has no data? A spreadsheet was posted only this past weekend in materials for this board meeting. What bonds is Harmony using, as the PCSB report says Harmony intends to use bond proceeds while its application doesn't reference any? Because neither the application nor the PCSB report say this, how many staff and parents were included in Harmony's August 2025 survey? Who were they, and what percentage of the school community did they represent? Was Harmony's survey the first notification to the school community about the new location, as Harmony's board meetings have not had lengths, times, or locations posted? Did anyone besides Harmony board members attend their June, July, and August 2025 board meetings that discussed the building? Also, there is nothing on Harmony's website with the September board meeting notes, which are included with its application here. Hope Charter School rented the property that Harmony is applying to purchase and locate at. What is the purchase agreement now between Harmony and the property's current owner, which is apparently a Florida real estate firm? Will some other entity actually own the property such that Harmony will only rent it, like Hope did? For facilities as well as education services, Hope had fiscal relationships with Entrepreneurial Ventures in Education and 2 other entities related to each other, Schoolhouse Finance and Imagine Schools, Inc. Will any of these organizations be involved with Harmony? What relationship will Harmony's current management organizations have with this new facility? Will there be any relationship between Harmony, this new facility, and a third party in the manner that Imagine had, for which it was fined in Missouri for self-dealing? In that case, Imagine owned a property that at least to a school it managed. I look forward to you providing the public answers to these questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jablow. Appreciate your testimony. We did also receive it in written form. Juanita Bug Barber. Jonah, do you see?
I do not see Juanita on the list, and I was informed that she hadn't registered as of 30 minutes ago, so she might not be showing up.
Okay, we'll wait to see if she comes on before the end. Lorena Flores.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Hi, Ms. Flores. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. So good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak on the mergers and acquisitions policy. I appreciate the board's effort to bring some more structure into school transitions, but I urge you to strengthen this policy to prioritize student safety, institutional accountability, and compliance risks. My concerns come from a documented experience at Washington U Ying, where multiple families reported serious failures in supervision, documentation, mandated reporting, and transparent communications. These concerns went unresolved despite repeated attempts to raise them. Some families, including mine, were ultimately forced to withdraw our children simply to keep them safe. This is not just a school-specific issue, it's a governance risk. When a school has ongoing safety or compliance failures, those problems don't disappear during a merger. They get absorbed into a larger system, putting even more students and staff at risk. I respectfully urge the board to strengthen the policy in 4 key ways. Require safety and compliance risk reviews before any merger. This should include an assessment of safety incidents, mandated reported practices, documentation, quality, and patterns of apparent and staff complaints with independent verification when needed. Establish minimum eligibility criteria tied to safety and governance, not just academics or finances. Schools with unresolved safety or compliance issues should not be eligible to merge until deficiencies are corrected. Require public disclosure of safety-related risks. Families have the right to know whether a merger will carry unresolved problems into their child's school environment. Protect teachers and staff during M&A transitions, including whistleblower protections, anonymous reporting channels, and reassurances that staff cannot be penalized for cooperating with oversight. Ultimately, families should not be told that this is a school of choice, which often translates into, if you don't like it, leave. Many families cannot simply leave. No family should have to choose between the safety and access to education. Structural accountability is not optional, it is foundational. I urge the board to ensure that M&A policy reflects this reality and protects all students, teachers, and communities involved. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Flores. We have indeed taken in your public comment and appreciate your pushes. Kate Godfredson.
Kate is not present tonight.
Okay, and did Juanita happen to come in during that time? Nope, I don't see her either. Okay.
No, she has not joined us.
Okay. Well, Kate and Juanita, if you do happen to see this meeting, we do welcome your public comment and ask you to submit it to us at public.comment@dcpcsb.org. Thank you to our speakers this evening. This concludes the public comment portion of our agenda. Next on our agenda, we have a charter amendment request from Harmony DC PCS, sorry. I yield the floor to Bijan Lane, specialist in our sector planning and compliance department, to introduce the request. I'd also like to invite representatives from the school to provide remarks. Welcome, Bijan.
Thank you, Chair Wright. Hello, my name is Bijan Lane, and I am a specialist in the School Performance Department. Tonight, the board will hear from Harmony DC Public Charter School regarding its request to amend its charter agreement. The school seeks to relocate from 62 T Street Northeast to 2917 8th Street Northeast beginning in school year 2026-27. Representatives from the school are here to answer your questions.
Great, thank you. And I see a lot of folks have the same last name. Maybe it's probably the sharing of your name. Welcome, welcome.
Good evening.
Okay. Dr. Turkay, am I saying your last name correctly?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Dr. Turkay, I see there's another one of you here. Is that someone else we can rename from your team?
Yes, Miss Candice Smith, one of our board members.
Okay. Jonah,
And-
did you hear that for Candace Smith? It's also under Miss Dr. Turkay? Okay. Anyone else that we're waiting for, Dr. Turkay?
I think Miss Julia Irving was going to join. I'm not sure if she is able to.
Okay. I don't see her in the attendee pool, but if she does join, we will.
Okay, she's here. So
Okay.
maybe Miss Smith. Let me check. Um, I think we can start. I mean, I don't want to.
Okay, well, if there is someone else on your team, please just have them raise their hand and we will elevate them to proper. Oh, I see, the second Dr. Turkay. What's your name? We can change your name for you. Uh-oh, can't hear you.
Jonathan Church, I'm sorry about that.
Okay. Hi, Jonathan. All right, Dr. Turkay, do you want to begin by introducing? Oh, I see two hands raised. Joan, I assume you're on that. Do you want to go ahead and introduce your team?
Yes, my name is Muhammed Türkay. I'm the CEO at Harmony DC Public Charter School. With me, we have our board president, Dr. Yalçın Akyıldız, and our principal, Mr. Kulha. Our financial advisors, Drew Masterson and Jonathan Church, and our board members, Miss Julia Smith and Miss Candace Smith. They're also present as well. I think the last two names are supposed to be them. So about to confirm.
Okay, so we're just with Julia Irvin and Candace Smith?
I think they just joined the last two ones. So
Okay. Okay. Well, if you'd like to begin with a presentation or share any information.
Yes, please. So my name is Muhammed Türkay. I just want to briefly present our history and what we want to achieve. So we are serving in Ward 5. This year we have 184 students. We have about 81% at-risk population. We opened back in 2014-15 school year. This year our expected population rate is 22%. We expect that to be 27% at the end of the year. Our homeless rate is 17.8, almost 18%. Last year it was 23%. About 96% of our students are African American, about 2% is Hispanic, and 1% is white. So this graph shows the number of students we serve in DC. Back in 2014-15 school year, we had 66 students, and we had a K-12 enrollment with 550 cap. We have been using the same building for the past 12 years. And fast forward 21-22 school year, we started to serve pre-K. And from 114 to 140, our enrollment jumped. And pretty much every year our enrollment increased. For the last 3 years, we are at full capacity. We cannot increase the enrollment anymore. And we've been looking for a school building for pretty much last 12 years. So I just want to show you the number of students that we had over the years. And this year, our enrollment number, final enrollment number is like 184. A brief academic and other history. So like many other schools, we are fighting with the attendance issues. And one of them is chronic absenteeism. Although we have a lot more to accomplish, but we have decreased our chronic absenteeism from 82% to 49% last year. And this year, hopefully it's going to be in 30s and even lower. Just keep in mind the city average is around like 40 percentile. So hopefully it will be lower than the city average. On the other side, we also increased our in-city attendance from 78% to 86%. With 86.33, we were above the charter average last year as well. This graph shows our academic data last year. Pretty much all the data shows that we improved everything. Our ELA proficiency rate improved from 8 to 10%, and math proficiency rate improved 10 to 17%. And both level 3 plus for math and ELA, they improved from 18 to 38 and 36 to 52. In fact, we had one of the highest improvement in the city. Our median growth percentile and growth to proficiencies are pretty high as well. So the reason that we came to the board is we had a once a decade opportunity. As you know, last year school closed. We were close to our school building. After discussing with our community board members and parents and students, we wanted to move to the new facility. There are several reasons for that. The first one is it's close to Metro. It's between Brooklyn Metro and Rhode Island. Our staff and students and parents, they can come by walking. and transportation is the most important thing in DC. We've been looking for a building for many years. I personally looked for more than 20 buildings, but none of them were school buildings, and they were not close to our building, and they need lots of construction. But this building is already a school building, very close to us, between two metro stations, and a great price. So we didn't want to miss this opportunity. This is a fully ready, moving ready school building. There's nothing major needed. We're just going to paint classes and do some small repairs, but we can move as if we want. And there are some of the pictures from the current building. So we spoke with the ANC board, ANC Commissioner, Mr. Arusahni, and we expressed our projects to him, and we told him what we want to do, and he was very supportive of our project, and he also wrote a support letter for the school. So we partnered with Deliberate. We asked our parents, community members, and students, and most of them, they were supportive of the school relocation. And internally, we asked all the parents one by one, and we asked them if they will come or not. And 88.4% they said yes, definitely. And only 3 students, which is 1.8%, they said they will not be able to come. And some of them are moving out of town. Some of them are moving with their siblings to different school. And we have only 5 students, we did not have a response. And only 6.7% they wanted to see the building before they make the decision. But our school community is supposed to move as well. We had several meetings throughout the year with our staff members, and 100% of our staff members are supportive. In our current building, we use every inch of the building, every small space. Every building, every room is occupied by at least 2 adults, and everyone is very excited to move a bigger space to better serve our students. There will be lots of benefits. The first one is the attendance. We believe our attendance will increase dramatically, and this will also help us achieve a higher achievement for the students as well. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Dr. Tarkay. So before I turn it over to the board members to ask their questions, I know you probably heard and received public comment, some of which was shared this evening. And so I wanted to give you an opportunity to respond to anything that you heard and to share a little bit more. I know there are going to be some questions from the board about financing and how this works, but I did just want to give you an opportunity to respond to the public comment that was shared this evening.
Yes, so we don't have any relationship with the previous owner or previous school or their CMO or other people. So we are a totally different entity, and we don't have the same structure. That's the first thing. So all other comments that I briefly discussed with the charter board members, the charter office people. Let me open the stuff one very quickly. So Harmony intends to buy the building. We are not planning to, the third party will not buy the building, and we don't have any relationship with the current owners or the other CMOs. So we don't want to be related with those organizations. So we are totally different.
Okay, so you plan to purchase the building. There was a question, and I think in your application you talked about bonds. Have those bonds already been received? Have you gone through that process with DC already?
So, Mr. Masterson, Mr. Durham, can you?
It's actually a loan, not a bond. So that was an error on my part in the application to call it a bond.
Okay.
But yeah, we're pursuing financing the Civics FIF fund and well into the credit review process.
Okay. The last thing that I want to, sorry, go ahead, Mr. Master. Were you saying something else?
No.
Okay. Before I turn it over to board members, I did want to ask, there were some questions about your board minute meetings and the information there. I would just ask you to update those, to respond if you have not, just to make sure you are complying with the Open Meetings Act and providing the transparency into your governance.
So our board meetings, minutes, and all the documents are online, and they have been available for the past several, it's basically online all the time. And We don't see any compliance issue on that part.
Okay.
So the only thing that happened is like our October meeting happened in instead of October, second week of October, we moved it to October 25th as an in-person meeting. The next meeting was November 4th. And since November 4th and October 25th was very close, we canceled November 4th meeting because they were very close to each other. And it was posted on our website as well. And all the meeting times, locations, Zoom links, and everything is available on our website.
Okay, great. Thank you. Treasurer Stanley Beatty?
Yes, thank you, Chair Wright. Harmony team, I have just a few questions about the acquisition, and thank you for clarification regarding the loan versus a bond. I think you mentioned the financier is Civics LIF. Is that a traditional lending institution? Is that an institution that's specific to charter schools? What is that institution?
Yes, Civics FIF Fund.
FIF.
They're a not-for-profit lender doing all sorts of not-for-profit lending, but with a large specialty in charter schools.
In charter schools. Okay, that makes sense. And it's traditional financing. It's not a bond, although that was in our reading material. Is the 5% interest rate correct?
6% is their estimate.
Okay. Okay. And then I read that you are anticipating a February close on your acquisition. Is that still the case?
Yes.
Okay. And is that contractual per your acquisition agreement to close in February?
That's correct.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yes. Okay. Okay. Perfect. And then in terms of the impact to your finances, I was reading sort of the commentary from staff, and notwithstanding the fact that you all are currently financially healthy, this is a sizable purchase. So I just want to talk about, first of all, how you are thinking about your enrollment increases. Just talk to me about how you are projecting the increase, and then what you will do or how you're thinking about if you don't necessarily achieve those projections, which of course is not what we want. We want you to achieve the projections, but talk about how you came up with them, and then how you will think about if you don't achieve them.
So Harmony DC increased its enrollment from 110 to 184. The only reason that we couldn't reach more was that our school is at full capacity, and we had to convert several offices pretty much every other year to make small classes. Every year we get around 350 applications, a little bit more or less, and usually get like 60 to 80 students. We get students based on our space, but if we have space, we can get them earlier, and we will increase our number of students. We are very confident on that. If we get most of our students next year based on our survey, speaking with our parents, most of them will come back. And if you get 60 to 80 students, we can easily reach our enrollment goals very easily. If for any reason we cannot reach our enrollment goals, if it stay the same, we made a really good budget, and we work with our team, and we have some non-essential team members that we can kind of like eliminate, and school will be still in financially healthy position. So we don't have any concern on that part.
Okay. And with the cost cutting with the non-essential team members, there's no change or no impact to your programming.
No.
Okay. Okay. You mentioned that there may be some renovation, but perhaps maybe not, or maybe it's light reno. Does that still foot to the potential $1 million that you've earmarked, or could it be less than that, or how are you thinking about renovations?
So we are working with an architect, and we kind of get several estimates what needs to be done. We don't think it's going to be $1 million, but just to be safe, we put $1 million aside. But we just to make sure that the building is nice, attractive to students and families. So that's why we want to paint them and kind of like make some more repairs. And eventually we want to have a STEM lab, STEM class. We just want to convert one of the classes to the STEM lab. So none of those require any permit, because it's just kind of like paint and that kind of stuff. There's no structural changes. As far as for the cost, after the closing, we will see what needs to be done. And if we have money, we will update the building as needed, but I don't think it's going to be $1 million.
Okay. And it sounds like whatever you're anticipating in terms of renovation, there shouldn't be any real downtime in terms of the building either. If you're just talking about paint and light work of that nature.
That's
Okay.
correct. Yeah, so basically everything will follow the timeline. So the building will be ready. Our goal is to make it ready at the end of May. So we want to bring our current students to the new building and kind of show them what the next school year will be. That's our goal.
Okay, that was my other question. So you'll essentially have or execute on the acquisition in February, then you will finish everything that you need to finish by May. Was that the timeline?
It's not the timeline, but our internal goal is like to finish at the end of May or maybe like early June. So our
Okay.
goal is to bring our current students to the new facility and show them the classes, play area, basketball area, and how to drop off and pick up, and then show the classes. That's our goal. We can still do that because there's no, even tomorrow we can do it, but we just want to show them when the building is like nice and attractive.
Sure. No, that makes sense. And then my last question is, given sort of what you're tackling in terms of purchase price, is the move to the new facility a precursor to you all thinking about grade expansion, or are you literally just facilitating this acquisition so that you can have capacity for existing students? Or what you project to be your increased enrollment? Or are you thinking bigger than that?
So right now we're only thinking to reach our enrollment cap. We didn't count any possibility or anything for any expansion. So we're just thinking for pre-K to 5th grade. Our enrollment cap is 250.
Okay. Okay. And last question, is there anything that you anticipate or perceive that might delay your acquisition such that it wouldn't happen in February? I know you said it's on track, but is there anything that may delay it?
So maybe Masterson can answer, but from my perspective, even if there is a delay, we can extend for more time. So
Okay.
we have enough time to close the deal. So February is not a strict deadline. So we have said,
That's where I was going with it. Do you have extension options
yes, we have 4 more months extension option.
with no fee?
There's a fee, but that fee will go to the purchase price. So basically,
Okay.
we still good.
Okay. And you said there's 4?
There's 4 more months we can extend. 2 months, the fee will go to the purchase price. So basically, there's no fee. But the other 2 months, if there's anything comes up, they are non-refundable, but the fee is very minimum. So we're not worried
Okay.
about it.
I was going to say, I'm not going to ask you what the fee is, but if you end up incurring it, it's something that you all have thought about. You've modeled it in your financials.
That's it, yeah.
Very good. Okay. That's it for me, Chair Wright. Thank you.
Thank you, Treasurer Stanley Beatty. Vice Chair Salmon.
Ms. Jablow submitted a written version of her oral testimony, which is available on our website. To the extent you haven't done so already tonight, I'd appreciate your receiving responses to the questions that she raised before our December meeting. Could you do that?
Yeah, if you want, I can send a written response to all the questions that she asked for. How do you want? I mean, I think that might be the better. I can just write a written response to all the questions that she asked for.
That's fine.
Okay.
Did you do any external community outreach in addition to the meeting that you had with the Advisory Neighborhood Commission?
So I met with most of the schools in the area, and I get their start and end times. So our times are different. So basically, we will not have any traffic in the area. Even the early days, our earliest dismissal times are different. We reach those people out. And I also speak with the other community, basically our parents, and in the area, we spoke with them. And they're all very supportive of the school.
Can you tell us what specific measures and partnerships the school will implement in coordination with the ANC to manage traffic flow and address safety and parking concerns?
So the first part about the parking, so the building has 25 to 30 parking spaces, which is more than enough for our school. So our staff will use our parking space. We don't expect them to use the street parking. Harmony DC has different start and end times compared to other schools in the area, so that will also relieve the traffic. And we offer before and after care. So most of the students, they come different times. They don't all come at the same time. And we also offer bus transportation. And some of the students, about 20 to 30%, they use bus, and they're usually gone within a very short time frame. In our current location, the parents, they pick up the students, and everything is done by like 6-7 minutes. Everyone's gone, so there's no wait time at all.
Thank you. I don't have any more questions.
We have any other, I don't see any other board members who have issues. Thank you, Harmony, for your presentation. We will vote on this next month. Please, per the request of Vice Chair Salmon, get those responses back to the public comment that we have received from you before our vote in December.
Okay.
And we will see you all at that time. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you so much.
Chair
Yes,
Wright,
yes.
may I raise an issue? Given that we know that there's an error in the staff report, can we get that corrected as well as it relates to the financing?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Harmony team.
Okay, thank you.
Next, we will hear from Hannah Kusina, the Director of Sector Planning and Compliance in our School Performance Department, about the proposed mergers and acquisition policy. As we open the public hearing on the proposed mergers and acquisition policy, I want to acknowledge the significance of this moment. This policy is about ensuring that when changes in the sector do occur, they happen in a way that protects students, strengthens quality, and upholds transparency. Our goal tonight is to listen carefully, ask the right questions, and understand the staff's proposed approach, the thinking, the rationale, and the framework behind it. This hearing is an opportunity to hear directly from staff about how the policy was developed, what it is intended to accomplish, ensuring that both the board and the public have a clear understanding of the intended policy. I also want to emphasize that tonight is part of a deliberate and transparent process. The board has requested a roundtable discussion on December 8th to continue the public dialogue on this policy and to make our deliberation visible to the public. That session will allow us to hear from experts, sector partners, and the public to ensure that the community can see how we are responding to the feedback we've received and to the concerns raised by members of the board. We've taken this extra step because of how seriously we take the long-term implications of this policy. With that framing, I'll now turn it over to Hannah, who will walk us through the staff's presentation of the proposed policy. After her presentation, I will open the floor for the board questions and discussion. Welcome, Hannah.
Oh, hello, good evening. As Chair Wright announced, my name is Hannah Cousineau, and I am a director in the School Performance Department. We asked that the board hold a public hearing on the proposed policy tonight. I look forward to discussing that with you shortly. But before that, I would like to provide an overview of the policy, specifically explaining why it matters, what mergers and acquisitions are, how the process works, and when the board will vote on the final updated version. So let me just do this right now. Okay, can you see my presentation right now? You never know sometimes, right? Okay, so the policy under consideration pertains to requests for mergers and acquisitions. Like with anything, we always need to ground ourselves in the why this policy matters. Population forecasts for school-age children are down, and we need to acknowledge that reality and the challenges that comes with that reality. This graph is from the DC Policy Center's article, DC Voices Early Signs for Enrollment in school year 25-26. It shows DC births and public PK3 enrollment over time. The red line represents births from 4 years earlier so that it aligns with that year's pre-K3 enrollment. The majority of pre-K3 students are born 4 years before they begin school. This orange line shows pre-K3 enrollment. Births have been declining over time, and we are now seeing that reflected in lower pre-K3 enrollment and relatedly lower funding. As these smaller pre-K3 classes matriculate, upper grades will experience declining enrollment and per pupil funding. As that same DC Policy Center article states, ongoing concerns about job stability among federal and government employees and contractors may lead to more families relocating out of the district, further affecting enrollment. Additionally, school leaders have reported attendance and enrollment challenges due to immigration enforcement and the precariousness of social supports. These fears and uncertainty are reflected in today's headlines and have impacts on enrollment. Declining birth rates and federal uncertainty color our reality. This policy matters because we need to meet this moment with thoughtful sector planning. We believe that this policy offers a set of pathways to support the sector's sustainability, efficiency, and quality. To support this vision, we engaged with Bellwether to conduct research and interview stakeholders. We gathered input from LEA leaders, city agencies, support organizations, and other authorizers to inform the policy's design. Thank you so much to those that participated in these initial conversations. We value your feedback, so much so that I gathered and I placed everyone's logo on this slide here, a true labor of love. So let's get into our definitions. What is a merger? What is an acquisition? And to begin my framing, in each of these three pathways, here we go. You'll see there are three pathways here: merger, standard acquisition, and an emergency acquisition. In each of these pathways, we assume that there are two LEAs involved. However, based on feedback that we heard from school leaders, the policy allows for reconfigurations involving more than two parties. As Dr. Walker Davis said in her opening remarks, a merger is when two independent LEAs combine into one LEA under a single charter. In a standard acquisition, one LEA acquires another LEA or campus not at immediate risk of closure. And finally, in an emergency acquisition, one LEA acquires another LEA at immediate risk of closure. Please note that in the policy as proposed, these will only be considered in extreme circumstances. If we are to truly meet this moment with thoughtful sector planning, then emergency acquisitions can no longer be the default pathway. The policy recognizes the need for clarity should these extreme circumstances arise, but there is an intentional shift in philosophy and practice to support the sector's long-term sustainability, efficiency, and quality. From a practical perspective, these are three different pathways requiring different levels of collaboration, planning, and resource allocation. From a legal perspective, they are functionally the same. The School Reform Act allows for a charter LEA to acquire the assets of another LEA and enroll their students. One charter will go away while the other will be amended. Like with the Aspire policy and technical guide, we developed our draft of the policy off of a shared set of guiding principles. They are driving towards excellence, need and demand, and organizational capacity. I'll give you a moment to read those over. When thinking about the goals of this policy development process, we need to consider DCPCSB's holistic approach to sector planning. Please note that we view this proposed policy for mergers as acquisitions as part of a broader suite of policies and guidelines that pertain to opening new schools, expanding schools, or reconfiguring schools. All of those elements share those three guiding principles found on that previous slide: driving towards excellence, need and demand, and organizational capacity. And they share a common review process with a standard of approval. So, how will the proposed process work? It begins with minimum eligibility criteria. This is the minimum eligibility criteria for a merger, a standard acquisition, and an emergency acquisition. These connect back to those guiding principles of driving towards demand, particularly in our review of academics and finances. They are intended for potential applicants to get a quick up or down whether or not they meet these criteria as determined by the most recent set of data. You'll note that it's the same set of criteria for a merger. They pertain to performance, so whether or not you are meeting your charter goals, if you're an alternative accountability framework school, or the expectations under Aspire. In a merger, we state that the LEAs involved must be at least a level 3 for 2/3 of campuses or the frameworks, and that at least one LEA must be performing at a level 1 or 2. Additionally, there's expectations for finance about meeting key financial indicators, and that no party involved must have conditions from their most recent charter review, particularly high-stakes conditions. In a standard acquisition and an emergency acquisition, you'll note that there are bifurcated criteria. They pertain to the LEA to be acquired versus the LEA seeking to acquire. There are many overlaps in that LEA seeking to acquire with those criteria for a merger. And the real difference between the LEA to be acquired in a standard versus emergency acquisition is about the timing. It's about if the school is facing an imminent threat of closure, whether that's due to its charter potentially being revoked or not renewed, if the school's board is voting to relinquish the charter, or if it has some impending situation, such as a financial crisis, that is forcing a closure decision. So this slide here shows the process for mergers and standard acquisitions. The process begins with the notice of exploration. It is an optional step, so it's in gray, but it allows for initial conversations between the school and DC-PCSB. The letter of intent is a required step, and as of now, it is due on April 1st. This step responds to feedback that we heard from schools who want to know more about DC-PCSB and staff and board reactions to their plans prior to working on a complete application. That application would be due, if you get the green light, that no objections to proceeding, on June 1st. Then we are following a process that you might be familiar with if you follow our new school charter application guidelines. We will conduct a capacity interview if needed with the founding teams, the leadership teams of all the involved parties. We will hold a public hearing like we are tonight, and there will be a vote. Staff will make a recommendation to its board for approval with conditions, or denial. If if the board does does vote for approval, then there will be a planning year. That's an opportunity for the schools to solidify plans for facilities, being clear about the staffing plans, the leadership transition plans, the way that they are gathering curriculum. That's akin to the experience new schools have, making sure that everything is ready for to receive students in the fall. This is the process for emergency acquisitions. As a reminder, we are moving away from emergency acquisitions as the default for M&A. This policy focuses on creating the conditions for thoughtful and future-focused sector planning to support our sustainability, efficiency, and quality, and will only approve these requests under extreme circumstances. You'll note here that the timeline is scooched up from the other process. We will receive letters of intent February 1st, but honestly sooner. We would like to be in line with the My School DC deadlines as we can, though we recognize that we are still working to get all the data together for schools to make informed decisions. If staff in a subsection of the board does not have any objections to proceeding, a final full application would be due April 1st or sooner. That same process, and the two outcomes would either be approval or denial, and that emergency acquisition would go into effect immediately. DCPCSB staff will make recommendations to its board based on the review of the application and the full process against the standard for review, a standard for approval. These standards are found in our new school charter application guidelines, and they will be reflected in the revisions of the existing enrollment ceiling increase policy. We'll talk more about these commonalities, I'm sure, in our discussion and in the roundtable for next month. But for now, you'll see that they are need and demand, which is a required standard. At a minimum, all applicants must meet this standard. Sufficient progress in developing the plan, consistency of the mission, inclusiveness, and leadership capacity. So what happens next? On October 27th, you, the board, voted to open this policy for public comment. That public comment window expires today when we are holding the public hearing. After today, we look at all of the feedback we've received, we review it, and we really are intentional in considering how it can be incorporated, and we respond to all the public comment that we receive. December 8th is this roundtable, and it's an opportunity to make that thinking about that consideration of the public comment public and transparent. You'll learn more about staff's thought process. We'll hear from experts as well, weighing the ways that the policy can be amended to address the public comment that we receive. And finally, the board is scheduled to vote on this policy on January 26th. And let me state that that policy would be revised, it would be a final version, and it would go into effect immediately. And with that, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Hannah, for that presentation. I'm going to take the liberty of kicking us off here. So I do just want to note for the record that I am uncomfortable with the title mergers and acquisitions. You've heard me say that before. And while I understand the intent, the phrase just feels more corporate than educational and can suggest that schools are entities to be traded rather than communities to be sustained. I know that's not the intent. So I think it's important that our language reflect the public and student-centered purpose of this work. So I welcome continued thought about whether there's terminology that better conveys our intent. So I know you all are thinking about it, and some of it's going to be changing public because we've rolled this out as a M&A policy, but I'd like us to start practicing that so a new terminology so the public can do the same.
Heard loud and clear.
All right. So can you articulate clearly what specific problems this policy is designed to solve? And as you do that, how it advances our authorizing goals of equity, quality, and sustainability?
So to begin with, the School Reform Act states that when a public charter school closes, the assets may be, and I'm going to quote here, transferred to another charter school in a transaction overseen by the chartering authority if the acquiring school agrees to enroll the closing school students at the start of the following school year. This policy is intended to establish that process by which PCSB, as the chartering authority, will oversee such an asset transit acquisition. So, and as we've seen over the last few years, there needs to be more clarity about how PCSB will approach those types of decisions. And we want to offer that transparency to school leaders that are considering these types of reconfigurations, what they can expect from the process, what we are looking for, and how they can be prepared to make these thoughtful sector planning decisions.
Okay. But part of what you opened up with was talking about the birth rates and enrollment and things like that nature. So the School Reform Act has always existed and had that language. So why now this policy?
Yeah. Thank you for the follow-up question. Yes, as I laid out there, that we are in a much different environment than in 1995 when the School Reform Act was set into law. We are seeing these trends of declining birth rates, of lower enrollment, potential out-migration of the city, and we want to respond with a set of pathways that we think can best serve the students of DC. And emphasize too that these are pathways that require intentionality and planning, that we are not looking to be reactive but proactive, so that families can best understand all the options they have available to them, and that school leaders can do their best work in service of families and students.
So we've received some feedback, and I hope to receive more from the public. But what balance are we trying to strike between providing those clear standards and yet preserving flexibility for the LEAs around either innovation or autonomy, particularly for either our smaller or single site LEAs?
Yeah, it's a great question. And isn't that the rub with policy development there, is you want to create something that's evergreen, but flexible enough to respond to these situations that you might not be fully aware of in the moment. I think this gets at some of the differences between this policy and then the accompanying suite of materials that will be rolled out when the policy goes into effect in January. So differentiating between minimum eligibility criteria, like your performance on the Aspire framework, versus an application or a letter of intent really being an opportunity for you to make that case, to show the thought, the planning that went into this, to add context, right, to some of those raw data points as well. I feel like there was a second part to your question that you were talking about single site and smaller LEAs as well. Can you rephrase that for me, please?
Yeah, so like my question was, right, we want to provide the clear standards and put some parameters around what is already allocated in the SRA, but we also want to preserve flexibility for autonomy and innovation. And we've received feedback, particularly as it comes to smaller or single site LEAs, is feeling very prescriptive. And we've also received feedback that it is encroaching upon the innovation or autonomy.
Yeah.
I see Dr. Walker.
All right, yeah, go for it. I have a couple of thoughts that are percolating. Let me get them straight too.
Yeah, you can certainly add on. I think one of the goals and the benefits of, at least as this draft is structured, is that it does set a standard or minimal eligibility to apply, but it does take into context, number one, the factor of time. I think we've experienced that several of the acquisitions that we've had in the past happened under that emergency umbrella, and quite frankly, well-resourced and usually larger LEAs are better positioned to take advantage of those types of acquisitions when they happen at that during that time period. And so, number one, you've heard Hannah articulate that we see those types of acquisitions being more of the exception rather than the norm. But what we've built in for both the standard acquisition and the merger is an opportunity for schools to have the time to think through and make a case for why they would pursue either of those pathways. And more importantly, to have a strong acquisition or merger that allows a school, regardless of size, it's really about how positioned are you to meet the standard of approval more than your size, and does the time that we have allowed help schools be prepared to be able to successfully navigate either of those pathways. So I feel that this actually gives more opportunity for schools of varying sizes to be able to engage in this process and to have all of the criteria in front of them as to what PCSB is going to be able to use to assess their readiness for that pursuit. I think that's very different than when you have 6 to 9 months to make that happen. Smaller schools are not as easily able to navigate that process.
Yeah. And I want to tout to this idea of a merger. That's like an emerging space within charter authorizing. There have not been many examples nationally of true mergers where really it's equals coming together to collaborate and build something new together. And so I think that's something I'm proud of, that we are on the forefront of that innovation. And it gives a different opportunity for a reconfiguration than what currently exists in the space.
So while we're there, then what evidence or analysis supports the eligibility thresholds as they're currently written, right? Like, have we actually modeled out how many LEAs would actually qualify today? And does that align with the intent, right? So what you just said is you talked about time being built in there to do this, to make it more accessible, but have we modeled that out? Like, if we were to do it and approve it today, what that would look like, and do the two align?
I would say we could look at the performance under our accountability system, and we have a range of schools. Size does not dictate the performance. And so that's one way that I would say, yes, several of our schools can navigate this process just based on our criteria. Hannah mentioned that the guiding principles support not just the proposed merger and acquisition policy, but also our charter application and our formally enrollment ceiling increase to be named expansion policy. And we have a long track record of using those, the standard of approval for those types of applications. And I believe that the data suggests that serves us well in determining a school's capacity both to open and also to expand. So using similar standard of approval is based on what we have learned. But in terms of the body of research out there about mergers in general, as Hannah mentioned, we are on the forefront of this. And we've seen, for the authorizers who have done this, they've each done them differently. So I think we're going to learn what works in our context as well. But I feel good that the standard of approval has been tested, at least with respect to applications and expansion. And in the work that Bellwether supported us with, what we have come up with is pretty consistent with what both NACSA names as best practice and also what we have learned from the authorizers who've pursued this route. But Hannah, you could talk more about come out of that process.
I would just like to add that we, as a staff, as you as a board, are so looking forward to releasing, our first Aspire scores later this school year. And so public reporting is going to be, a key element of this policy, of that eligibility criteria. So schools will be able to, do a self-assessment. But this is also why that notice of exploration step, it's optional, but can be very important. It's an opportunity for interested schools to come to PCSB, talk about their eligibility, what could maybe show up that offers some unique context in a letter of intent or the application. We can get on the same page before, further planning is done and potentially done, in vain.
Well, I would, in preparation for the roundtable on the 8th, I'd actually like us to model this out. So I think there's one thing to talk about it in the abstract in terms of the intent. And I'd like to see, just as we did when we did Aspire, we talked about if we were to apply it today, X amount of schools would have been 3, 4, 5. I'd like to see it because I want to make sure that whatever policy we're putting in place is not just thinking about the future state of the school, but it is of the sector, but it is dealing with where we are in reality, and that we're then able to pivot should we need to, because I think there's intent and then there's application. So that is one kind of direct request to literally, if we did it today, based off the thresholds that you currently have written, how many would actually qualify? And then just do an honest assessment about whether or not that aligns with our intent. So I have a couple more questions, and then I'm going to open it up to other people. Right now, the emergency pathway appears largely the same as the standard one. It's just a compressed timeline. I heard you say it, but how are staff distinguishing between what qualifies an emergency and what should follow the standard process? That is not clear in the policy, and I think could cause confusion in terms of what comes before this board too. So how are you thinking about that? Yeah, I'll start with that.
Yeah. I think part of that, it gets to the way that we're evaluating that letter of intent. And it's demanding more on the part of the LEA to be acquired to make that case for why this school community needs to remain intact in some way. So you'll notice that the questions, the areas that are being reviewed in that letter of intent uses much more forceful language than in a standard acquisition policy does. And then yes, and I'd say in particular as it pertains to this question of need and demand. Why are families continuing to demand, like, via enrollment numbers like this type of program, and why do communities continue to need this particular offering in some capacity?
Okay, and while I understand that it will probably be impossible to think through every single scenario that may constitute an emergency, I do think for something like this, I don't think it should be left just to the description of the LEA and a letter of intent. Because again, if I'm at that point, right, I think our goal is to make this thoughtful planning that happens with enough runway. If that is our true intent, then I think we can come up with, it doesn't have to be all inclusive. You can use the formal language, including but not limited to.
Including but not limited to.
Our lawyers on here understand that term, but in all seriousness, I do think it is appropriate enough for us to create some scenarios and examples of what would constitute an emergency and what we would deem an emergency. One, because then I think it can help LEAs avoid getting to that point and actually taking advantage of opportunities sooner. And then it puts us less and less in a position of, I think, qualifications around that.
Yep. Yeah. As you are well aware, schools can close for a variety of reasons. And I think this policy can distinguish between the impacts of closing for academic concerns versus, some financial issues, for example, including but not limited to.
Yes, right. So one, before I turn it over to the rest of the board, the policy holds schools to clear submission deadlines. What expectations or internal processes will ensure kind of comparable timelines and transparency from PCSB in its responses? Right. So we're like by June, by February, April, you do this. By June, we're going to do that. What is our timeline, and how are we equally holding ourselves accountable to how we will respond? Because it does not make sense to have such a long timeline if we eat up 4 or 5 months of that with our own due diligence or process, et cetera. So what can the public expect around our response time and transparency for the same?
Yes. You're referencing that theme about timeline, in particular PCSB's timeline for response, came up in a couple of public comments that we received today. Of course, like any public comment we receive, we will deliberate on this. But I think it's safe to say that something like a letter of intent, PCSB could process that, between 2 and 4 weeks after we receive it, depending on if there's just anything outstanding. You'll note that, for example, while the finance standard is rooted in the FAR, it says that we will consider more recently available data if it's out there. And so I could imagine that that might be a point if we received like unaudited financial statements that just might require some extra internal time to process. And then for an application with a June 1st deadline, like with all, um, I should not say all, but with most amendment requests, we are required to give 30 business days of notification to the ANCs that are impacted. So we can use that timeline to set a public hearing and to then set the vote. We like for those to happen in subsequent meetings. So you can imagine about 45 calendar days after we receive an application, we will hold a public hearing. And then at the next board meeting, so hopefully that's a month afterwards, there can be a vote.
Okay, so I think we should be responsive to that and
Yeah.
hold ourselves to that, to some sort of semblance of timeline, with very rare exceptions to us meeting that part.
Agreed. And there could even be language around, if an extension is required, it's mutually communicated and agreed upon.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to turn it back over to the rest of the board member. Thank you all for indulging me in that. Board Member Crucy.
Thank you for all those questions. Those are great. Hannah, thank you for your hard work on this, which is not yet done. My question is going to probe a little deeper on some of the innovation questions that Chair Wright flagged. This sector has not, is in our city's choice system, is designed to be not just reactive and responsive to dynamics, but also to be proactive and innovative. We collectively as a city and country and world are experiencing a lot of dynamicism and change in technology, and we can barely foresee, we're just beginning to attempt to foresee its impact on changes to the economy and workforce in the future. How is this designed to empower our LEAs to be able to be responsive and proactive to that? Not just facing declining enrollment, but actually thinking differently in ways that we are so many steps ahead from the largest LEA in the district to be able to think ahead and things like that?
Yep.
That's my first question.
Great question. Well, I do think looking at enrollment numbers, birth rates, is kind of what forced us to get a lot more specific about what this policy could be. It is, as you're pointing out, an opportunity to also like reimagine the future. That's why I really want to point towards mergers and standard acquisitions don't need to are not supposed to be happening under duress, right? They are meant to be opportunities for LEAs to achieve economies of scale, to build out their programming. I could see a situation in which a single site middle school, a single site high school can combine to offer that grade 6 to 12 continuum that many families look for in school choice. Add a specialized program, right? A new, and at the high school level, more athletics, potentially schools, a founder, a very valued and loved school leader might be stepping down, and a merger and acquisition offers an opportunity to continue on that legacy, but under like a different context. But a context that is could be very thoughtful and very like I don't want to use the word responsive. Can really hold that memory and that promise that maybe that first school was founded under. So these are this is going to require different thinking. It's going to require a lot of collaboration across city partners and collaboration with our charter school support organizations.
Mhm.
But I think that we really can get to a place where this sector can stay multifaceted. There can be many different types of LEAs, sizes of LEAs, but these are pathways to, I think, really meet our present moment and get to this ideal charter sector that we all imagine.
Yes, thank you. I mean, I'm hearing stories from other parts of the country of like really different things, like schools centered around esports and like it's then the opportunity we have as a city where our gains were good, but we have so much farther yet to go. And we have some really innovative and forward-thinking school leaders that I'd hope that the way in which we frame this policy, as well as however we finalize its presentation, can foster the opportunity to think differently. Because again, the gap of where we are from where our students deserve and can be is still really far. My second question is more procedural. Just to clarify, so the comment period ended today or yesterday or something, but there's a roundtable in December. So there is still room for the agency to hear and consider, and what we vote on in January is only once it's kind of set. Is that right?
I will let Dr. Walker Davis confirm the timeline
Please.
because we're having some conversations today.
Yes, so as we posted, following the October meeting, the public comment period closes today. Given that we are having a roundtable, we fully expect that people will show up at our December meeting and maybe have public comment during the hearing. But as Chair Wright mentioned, we want to use that opportunity on December 8th to lift up what we've already heard in public comment, what we are thinking about in terms of adjustments to the policy, to ask our experts how we might adjust the policy in light of what we hear. We will hear new things again in that conversation at the roundtable, both from what they present and what questions the board asks. And then we will bring together everything that we've heard up to that point, both from our initial public comment period tonight, December 8th, make adjustments to the proposal, and as Hannah mentioned, bring back a final proposal recommendation to the board that incorporates all of the feedback and any changes that we think is responsive to that feedback and will land us a better product. So while official public comment ended tonight, we are open to being able to receive anything that we think will produce a better ultimate policy that we would recommend to the board, and have had a past practice of summarizing everything that we've heard on the matter at the time that we present a proposal.
Thank you.
Before I go to you, Treasurer Stanley Beatty, I know you have questions. I actually do want to note that I have asked the staff to extend the public comment period for one additional week through Monday, November 24th until 5:30 p.m. And that's because this is a significant policy with long-term implications for our sector, dare I say our city. And we do want to ensure we hear from as many voices as possible. So I am asking school leaders, community members, and partners to really dig into the draft, reflect on its potential impact, and share your insights and recommendations through our comment portal. That is public.comment@dcpcsb.org. Your feedback will directly inform how we refine this policy moving forward. However, we cannot keep it open forever. So I've asked staff to graciously extend it for one more week because we do want to hear from you, particularly now that you've had staff actually present the proposal. So, last month we just opened it for public comment without the staff presentation. You've now heard from Hannah. You've heard some feedback from the board, but we want to hear your feedback as well. But we need to give the staff enough opportunity to be able to respond to it at the public hearing, at the roundtable, next month, and then to be able to make whatever adjustments are necessary for a final vote. So we will be extending it for one more week until Monday, November 24th at 5:30 p.m. So if you're on this call watching via YouTube, please look up the policy. It is available on our website. Dig in and provide us your comment because we do really want to hear from you. So with that, Treasurer Stanley Beatty.
Yep, thank you, Chair Wright. Hannah, Dr. Walker Davis, I'm going to start with just a few points of clarification.
Sure.
And if you have them, great. If not, you can just log them and we can circle back to it on the round table. So on page 4, under the merger piece, we note the provision that LEAs must have at a minimum substantially met their charter goals. I was curious because we don't define across what time period. And if we don't, is it just the last cycle, or is there or is it a longer protracted time period?
Yep. Thank you. I agree that that should be clarified in the final version. This policy generally is looking at the most recently available data. But we can, that for those alternative accountability framework schools, we will offer clarity in the final version.
Thank you. And then same page, Hannah, on under the letter of intent where we talk about the sector planning data and a market analysis, it's market analysis, lowercase m and lowercase a. So is that an analysis that the LEA would commission, or is that referencing some analysis that PCSB has?
Yep. That sector planning data is meant to be about PCSB's analysis, whereas a market analysis would be additional context that the school could provide.
That the LEA would commission. So it would be a formal report commissioned by the LEA. Is that the idea?
Yep. I don't think I've ever used the word formal there, but yes, it would be it. I want to give schools an opportunity to add that context for the numbers that we have available to us. As you might be aware, right, there's certain elements, including like post-lottery applications that PCSB does not have full insight to, that a school could share with us.
No, I get it, and it makes sense. And I agree with you. I'm not suggesting that you add the word formal. I'm just drawing a distinction between data that we're producing.
We have versus, yep, I hear you.
Correct.
Yep.
Okay. And then on page 5, under the standard for approval, need and demand, help me understand when we say the applicants make a compelling case for why the merger improves the ability to meet community needs. Whose ability to meet community needs? Is that the sector's ability or the LEA's ability? And again, if you don't know, we can just flag it.
Yep. Nope. The LEA's ability. Yep.
Okay.
The LEA's the applicant's ability. You know why? It's because I use the applicant in the first part of that sentence. I didn't use it in the second part again.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, so those are my points of clarification. Thank you. On to sort of bigger picture. It seemed like some of the comments that we got suggested that the policy should allow participation from schools that perhaps haven't met all of the eligibility standards or all of the eligibility thresholds. And so I'm wondering, how are we thinking about how we're going to balance feedback from the sector with our responsibility, of course, to maintain quality and performance standards?
Thank you for that question. I was hoping to get a very direct version of that question, so appreciate it. A few things. One is that one of our guiding principles over all of our sector planning work is this driving towards excellence, right? How are we setting students to gain increased access to quality school options? Right now, as it pertains to academic performance, we are looking at Aspire. We are looking at the level that a school performs at. In the current Aspire policy and technical guide, we state that schools that perform at levels 1 or 2 are generally eligible to expand or reconfigure in a way like a merger or to acquire another school, whereas schools that are performing at a level 3 or lower, in this specific context for reconfigurations or expansions, that they generally would not be eligible. Now, we do grant an exception for mergers. We state that schools that are evaluated under Aspire both must earn a level 3 in the most recent Aspire, and that one must be a level 1 or 2. That reflects a few things that we learned in our research and in our interviews. I want to call out the Colorado Charter Schools Institute. They have experience with mergers and acquisitions, and they spoke to that they hold firm that one of those parties must be high performing as determined by their performance management framework. And in general, yes, this term mergers and acquisitions comes from the business community, but there is a whole host of evidence about the ability to truly go from a mid-level performance to an excellent level of performance, and really what that and what that takes, what that requires. It's a pretty big leap, and so from a practical standpoint, taking on such a major transition, so many moving parts, to really enact a thoughtful and high quality merger and acquisition requires so much. And so by setting that minimum eligibility at the level it is right now, we think that we are really allowing the accounting for some of that effort that it takes. And we believe that the school already has some really positive systems in place to allow that transition to occur.
Thank you for that, Hannah. That was a very thoughtful answer to that question.
It's almost like I expect someone to ask me that question.
A couple more. So of course there's always energy around expansion and or contraction of the sector, right? And so how are we thinking about if this policy could unintentionally accelerate consolidation of the sector, and like how are we thinking about safeguards to make sure that we're not taking away like a range of school models that are available to families?
Yeah. And as you heard me say, that is not the goal of this policy. The goal is to look for innovative solutions to sector planning, thoughtful, future oriented, to preserve what makes this sector so unique, right? And why families choose to send their students to charter schools, and adult students, choose to attend charter schools too. I'm sorry, I went on a tangent there. Can you please repeat your question?
That's okay. I think you got there. It's more so just thinking about with any policy, right? Or with
yes, the unintended consequences.
There's always the
unintended.
Right. And in particular with this sector, there's always energy around expansion and consolidation. And so are we keeping that front of mind with this policy, that we don't want unintended consequences, that we're not trying to accelerate the consolidation of the sector, that we are really trying to be mindful about giving schools the opportunity, or giving LEAs the opportunity to be flexible, to be innovative in the context of the policy? Just I'm sure we're thinking about that, but any thoughts that you have, or you, Dr. Walker Davis, have as it relates to that?
So another guiding principle is need and demand, right? So that involves really understanding what communities need, how families are making school choice decisions, and community engagement is central to that as well, right? So how that is a very clear requirement for proceeding with an acquisition or a merger. How are you involving your families? How have you solicited their input? How is that input incorporated? Why are families making those school choices in the first place? And how can we be thoughtful about preserving what made that school special and wanted in the first place? I also see that reflected in one of those standards is the consistency of the mission. And so even if the two schools don't share the same mission, how are you honoring elements of both missions as you move forward with this plan?
Yeah, and the only thing that I would add, Treasurer Stanley Beatty, is the callback to the opportunity for innovation, for folks to be thoughtful, for leaders themselves to be thinking about what they see ahead and own what that new configuration could look like. We already have policies that allow for grade expansions or contraction if a school decides to do that. So I don't think that this policy in it of itself compromises that. I think I want to underscore the notion of pathways that are available in this policy. We are not dictating any one approach that any school needs to take. We are creating a pathway that if someone does have the thought about how they might combine two school communities in the future, probably driven primarily by creating consistent feeders, because we don't have built-in feeders across charter LEAs. That might be a reason why someone would pursue this. Some of the other reasons that Hannah mentioned, I think the big driver here is that there is a lot of opportunities for schools to design what this reality of the combination of schools could be. This is not PCSB dictating that you need to choose any one of those pathways.
Perfect. And then my last question again is kind of goes back to a point of clarification. We use terms in the policy that I think we could really put a finer tooth or a finer pin on in terms of defining them, so that LEAs and even the industry itself, when they read this, they're clear about the financial and contextual conditions that are driving whatever the approval or the criteria is going to be. Like, I'll give you an example. We reference throughout the policy key financial indicators. And of course, you know, as the board, we know what those are, or we know that we have them. Let me say it that way. We know that we have a list of key financial indicators. What we don't say in the policy is if it's that they have to meet all of them, if they have to meet some of them. So perhaps we should think about making sure that we're clear about that. I think there's also a reference in here somewhere to like whether or not the city or sector can sustain the merger or the acquisition. It's just very broad language where if we're using that to define whether or not an LEA meets the criteria, we want to be a little bit more clear. So those are two examples. The last one that I flagged was on page 7 under the standard acquisition policy, under charter standard, where we say early warning indicators such as partially met charter goals or enhanced fiscal monitoring. Well, what does that mean? What are we trying to say there? Are we trying to say anything other than just traditional monitoring? Are we trying to say an FCAP and some other perhaps internal flags? Whatever that means, we should think about being clear as it relates to that, so that if somebody's reading this, they know the standard that they're being held to. Does that make sense?
Oh, tons of sense.
Okay.
To recall back Chair Wright's wonderful suggestion, there's some opportunities here for some including but not limited language.
Yes.
You are well aware that part of why I think especially that financial language feels vague is that we are developing a whole a wholesale financial oversight policy. So not wanting to overstep in this policy before that is determined and goes through the same process that we are participating in tonight. But what I hope that also indicates to you and to the public is that we are trying to establish through lines across policies so that they communicate with one another. So what is in the Aspire policy and technical guide is reflected on in decisions for mergers and acquisitions, just like a financial oversight policy will be incorporated into this one as well.
Thank you for that, Hannah. And Chair Wright, that concludes my questions, but I do just want to state for the rest of the board and for you as well, and I think I've mentioned this to you just in passing, Chair Wright, I have very strong thoughts and concerns around the emergency acquisition aspects of this policy. I look forward to talking about those and sharing those with my fellow board members as well as staff in the roundtable and even outside of the roundtable, but I have very strong thoughts and concerns about the need for an emergency acquisition aspect to this policy and what that means for us as an organization and as a sector. So.
Thank you.
before I'm going to come to you in 1 second, Board Member Crucy, I want to just follow up on two things from Treasurer Stanley Beatty's questions. When she talked about the schools improving versus not, like the eligibility threshold, and Dr. Walker Davis, you talked about it, and Hannah, you responded too. But part of, I think my first question is, right, we talk about having one of the schools having to be one or two, but there's nothing that's required that performance be demonstrated sustained over time for any amount of time. So depending on where that school is, they could be a 2 today and they were just under conditions, a few months ago. So I just want to note that I want to see something around sustained demonstrated performance. It's not just, as we think about this quality standard, it's not just about having reached it today, but like that it is sustained. And I know there's some language in there that talks about where you had to be before in terms of your review and things like that. But again, reviews are 5 years apart, right? And so it could be that and we've seen this, unfortunately, and we'll see it again coming up, where your last review was a clean one straight out the box, but you're a very different school 5 years later. So there's something there for me in how we're thinking about that. And then I'm very surprised the treasurer did not push more here, but I know for me, when we think about KFIs, and I actually appreciated what you said though about how we're looking at the financial policy, which becomes for me a timing question then, because we do have a lot of KFIs, but we all know that some KFIs are more important than others, right? And so I do think I would ask the finance team to be thoughtful around that, because those are I think the unspoken things that you all are looking at or has historically looked at that wasn't as transparent to folks in terms of what got you either to a yes or no when it came to acquisition. So if we're going to create a policy that does this, then we should define that as well. And it's not every key financial indicator is important in some way, but some are more important to others, depending on what it is we're seeking to do. So I just want to clarify those two. And again, this is the whole reason we're doing this, is because we know this is your first draft, right? This is your, the coming out, and this is taking into consideration the things that we need to talk about. And you may come at the round table and say, actually, it's better to be broad versus more specific for various reasons, and have to get us, try to get us there. But right now, that is for me the quiet that I want to say out loud, because those were the things that you looked at before that made the larger LEAs more attractive or better suited than other LEAs that might have come up in front. Okay. Board Member Crucy, I know you had a follow-up as well.
Yes, thank you. Hannah, I'm curious if is this the policy that if a school community and potentially school principal from DCPS were in a school that they would like to envision a different future? I know Paul had originally been a DCPS school many years ago. Is this the policy that would speak to it? I know in that cross-sector thing from last year, it didn't really speak to quality. And I know there's declining enrollment in some schools where there may be a community that's interested in leveraging the innovation that the charter sector offers.
Great question. That a school conversion, the School Reform Act would consider as like a new school charter application. That process for converting from a DCPS private or independent school into a public charter school, there are specific guidelines under the process for filing a new charter school petition.
That makes so much sense. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah.
So just for the record, both Vice Chairman and Secretary Shakur Adamafani said I talked so much I answered all their questions. So I asked all their questions, so they did not have additional questions. But the one thing I do want as we get ready to close out, as we do move towards the December 8th roundtable, Hannah, can you just share again how, or Dr. Walker Davis, I think maybe you had said it, how does staff plan to use the time between now and then to revise the policy, incorporate feedback, and explain any proposed changes to both board and the public? And then I think I have a harder question for you as a follow-up to that, which is like, do you believe that the current timeline provides enough space for the thorough analysis and reflection before we move to a final vote? So can you tell us how you plan to do this with my adjustment of the additional 1 week? But then once we have this roundtable where we will incorporate that feedback, how do you plan to explain those changes? And then do you believe that you have enough time to do the thorough analysis that's needed?
Yes. As is our typical process at PCSB, when we open a policy for public comment, we, bring together all of the comments we received. We look for themes. We basically create like a spreadsheet table where we are just listing everything that came up. And then that really starts this rich process of leaning on each other, looking to other experts, to other partners. That's why I'm actually really excited for this formal policy roundtable. It gives like an excuse to like formally re-engage some of these stakeholders that really helped to get us to this policy where it is today. We get all this public comment together. We start weighing about whether or not it can be incorporated and how so. If we are not going to incorporate something, we provide a direct response explaining why not. That document will then become a attachment to that final vote proposal. So you will get a readout of everything that we received and the way that we have considered it. And that goes into that final policy design. You'll see a redlined version that compares what you have received today for tonight's meeting and what was open for public comment versus this final version. You'll get a clean version of it. You'll get that redline version. You'll get this document that really captures this whole thought process, this deliberative process. And I don't know if Dr. Walker Davis had anything else to add there.
Yeah, I would say I feel confident that we'll be able to incorporate the public comment that we have received, what we should receive with this additional time, and also use the roundtable as an opportunity to vet and pressure test some of those. So, and then turn that around for the final vote. One of the other things that I wanted to speak to was your larger question, which I think it wasn't just, do we have enough time for the public comment, but do we have enough time to be ready with the full analysis for the implementation of the policy? I want to go back to where Hannah started with the engagement that we've had around the policy. And I also realized that thinking about something in the abstract is different than when the policy is in front and ready to go live. So I want to underscore your request, Chair Wright, that if there are additional comments, that people really take advantage of this additional week to submit those. But that being said, I do feel good about the work that Bellwether supported us with in terms of gathering research and speaking to other authorizers, and then in particular, speaking to our LEA leaders and sector partners. And I do believe that it reflects those perspectives. I also want to name that, and you mentioned it, Chair Wright, that there are some instances where we may need to have broad language in the policy, but as you know is true with our charter application, we have a lot of supporting documents to help folks navigate that process. And I would likely see us having that for this policy or the suite of sector planning policies so that folks could understand more specifically, what does readiness look like? What are some things that I might want to consider? And then the last thing that I would say about that is, whenever the board chooses to vote on this policy, and assuming that we do have one in place, our sector partners are going to be really important for this work because the application for doing this process, it's going to be a much more robust application than what we've seen before, particularly for a merger. But the work really happens both in preparing to navigate that process, but more importantly, after you have a decision from PCSB bringing two or more school communities together. And here is where partners are going to be helpful, both in helping LEAs to determine, is this the right move for me? Am I ready for this? What might readiness look like? And what's all of the work? While this is not a corporate policy, there is a business aspect to this in terms of folks looking at their financials, folks looking at bringing staffing together. And our LEA partners our sector partners are going to be very important in terms of providing the kind of resources and supports that LEAs need. So that's later once there is a board vote, but I do want to name that I feel confident that we can both incorporate the comments that we receive, but also create good supporting document and resources, both ourselves and in partnership with others to help navigate.
Mhm.
Great. Well, thank you, Hannah, for your presentation this evening and for the work that you all have done to date on this. I think you heard a lot of kind of probing questions just from either our initial review of the policy and reading the feedback and public comment that we've received today. I do hope that more folks will dig in and provide additional feedback. And I look forward to the December 8th roundtable where we can talk about this even more, because again, I think this has just long-term implications for our sector and our work together. And long-term doesn't mean bad, right? It means, I think positive ways to think about the realities that you shared with us in terms of birthing rates, but then also what this sector is meant to do in terms of thinking about innovation and thoughtful planning processes, which we want schools to be doing and feel like they have a pathway for. So thank you for that hard work. So just a reminder that the public comment and our comms team will make sure there are no issues in terms of being able to submit. You can submit to public.comment@dcpcsb.org. It'll be open until Monday at 5:30, and then we will have to close it so that the staff can actually be responsive to it. And then I think you had some technical ones around the policy itself, and then some modeling and so forth. So thank you for your time on this and your attention on this. And we look forward to engaging again next month.
Thank you for your questions.
All right. So believe it or not, board, we are just now getting to our actual public meeting. So I now move to approve the November 17th, 2025 board meeting agenda.
Second.
Secretary Adamafania, can you call roll, please?
Yes. Chair Wright,
Aye.
Vice Chair Sandman,
Aye.
Treasurer Stanley Beatty,
Aye.
Board Member Crucy,
Aye.
and I'm an aye as well.
All right, thank you. Oops. So next on our, I apologize. Next on our agenda, we have a charter amendment. Oh, no, we do not. Next on our agenda, we'll be voting on the facility amendment request from Friendship PCS. For that, I will yield the floor back to Hannah. Hannah, how do you say your last name? Because I know I mess it up each
You're
month.
good.
Cousineau.
Cousineau. Yeah.
Cousineau.
Cousineau.
Thank you.
Yep. You're good.
Cousineau. So welcome back, Hannah. And I'd like to invite representatives from the school. So if you are here on behalf of Friendship, if you want to just raise your hand, we will elevate you. All right, Hannah, if you want to go ahead and.
Yes. So, hello again. DCPCSB staff recommends that its board approve the request from Friendship Public Charter School to amend its charter agreement by, first, making administrative updates to 2 facility addresses, and second, repurposing 3 existing facilities to serve different campuses. DCPCSB staff also recommends that its board approve DCPCSB Board Chair Chantel Wright to sign the amendment on the board's behalf. The proposed changes pertain to 4 properties Friendship PCS already owns and operates. During the public hearing, the board inquired about the relationship between this proposal and the charter school's program grant Friendship PCSB had been awarded. The school clarified that it is in the planning phase of that grant and is not seeking DCPCSB's approval to open a new high school at this time. Furthermore, after the public hearing, Advisory Neighborhood Commission 4B, which encompasses 2 of the impacted Friendship PCS facilities, submitted a letter of support. Representatives from the school are here if you have any additional questions.
All right. Welcome, Friendship Team. Good to see you all. I don't know, we brought it up from a vote. I know you all did your presentation, so I don't think you have to present anything else. Are there any additional questions from the board before we vote? Okay, so seeing none, colleagues, I will now entertain a motion.
I move to approve the charter amendment request of Friendship Public Charter School and approve the DC PCSB board chair to sign the amendment on the board's behalf.
A second.
Thank you. Secretary Adamafania, can you please call roll?
Chair Wright,
Aye.
Vice Chair Sandman,
Aye.
Treasurer Stanley Beatty,
I'm an aye, and Chair Wright, I just wanted to acknowledge that staff did make the changes to the language that we discussed in the last board meeting. I didn't say it before we went to the vote, but I wanted to acknowledge that. I'm an aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Board Member Crucy,
Aye.
and I'm an aye as well, Chair.
All right, the motion passes. Congratulations, Friendship. Thank you for being here. And we look forward to the work you continue to do.
Thank you all.
Thank
Thank you.
you all. Have a great
Thank
evening.
you. You too. Up next, we'll hear a presentation from staff on charter reviews and renewals and effective charter school governance. For that, I will yield the floor to Dr. Walker Davis, who will be joined by Melody Sampson, our Chief School Performance Officer. Welcome, Melody.
Thank you, Chair Wright. I will quickly be turning this over to Melody Sampson and team, but I do want to use this opportunity to share about what we have, lessons learned, as well as planning that we have put in place for this year's review and renewal cycle. You will hear from Melody Sampson. You will also hear from Will Henderson, and Carlo Silbiger will close us out for this presentation. So I will turn it over to Melody.
Thank you so much, Dr. Walker Davis. And Jonah, if you will tee up the presentation that we'll be sharing tonight. Many thanks to you, Jonah. So good evening, board and community members. Tonight, as Dr. Walker Davis shared, we'll walk through DC PCSB's charter review and renewal process for school year 25-26, covering what's new, how we're strengthening transparency, and why strong governance is essential to school success. Before we begin, I wanted to share a quick story that captures why this work matters. At one of our schools that completed a charter review in an earlier school year, an 8th grade student named Marcus showed what strong accountability and responsive leadership can make possible. During the school's review, DC PCSB's insights highlighted uneven academic performance. The school's board and leadership took that feedback seriously, investing in teacher coaching, creating weekly data meetings, and tightening instructional supports. By the next year, the results spoke for themselves. On the DC CAPE assessment, Marcus moved from approaching expectations to meeting expectations in math, and his growth outpaced projections for both proficiency and year-to-year improvement. Marcus's progress isn't just a personal win. It's evidence of what can happen when schools respond to the review process with urgency and focus. Our reviews and renewals are designed to ensure every public charter school not only meets the standards in the law, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Give me a second. But also continues to grow in ways that directly improve outcomes for students like Marcus. Next slide, please. Public charter schools are public schools. That means that they're open to all students, they're tuition-free, and accountable for results. Each school operates under a charter or a contract with DC PCSB. Our job is to ensure schools meet the commitments in those contracts, academically, financially, and organizationally. Next slide. This year, we've refined the review and renewal process to make it more timely, transparent, and reliable. We began proactive outreach to school leaders and boards much earlier, giving everyone more time to align and prepare. We've also redesigned our reports. They're shorter, clearer, and easier to understand. Each school now has at least 14 days to review and respond to staff's draft preliminary report. Additionally, we're giving schools the opportunity to submit a narrative to accompany the final report, ensuring their perspective is included in the public record. Next slide. We're also improving communication regarding potential outcomes during a charter review or renewal. If a school is at risk of closure or facing major conditions, we're flagging that early, and we connect schools with partners like the DC Charter Alliance for added support. Finally, any non-continuance and non-renewal decisions will be finalized before the DC school lottery, ensuring families have accurate information when choosing schools. Now let's look at why we conduct charter reviews and renewals to begin with. Next slide, please. And next slide. Our review and renewal process ensures quality, accountability, and student success. When a school is initially approved, it's for a 15-year term or 15-year contract. We then conduct at least one comprehensive review of the school every 5 years. At year 15, the school must apply to renew its charter to continue operating for another 15-year term. When contemplating a school's review or renewal, DCPCSB's decision to continue, condition, or revoke the charter is made with the student's long-term success in mind. So let's move forward to the next slide, where we show that there are 12 schools that are under review and 5 schools that are up for renewal. You'll notice that one of the 12 schools that's undergoing renewal is actually subject to an out-of-cycle review ahead of its scheduled renewal in school year 27-28. Let's progress to the next slide. This one shows the time span for this year's review and renewal cycle. We'll evaluate each school's performance from school years 2021 through school year 24-25. These reviews assess academic performance, financial health, and compliance with applicable laws to confirm alignment with DCPCSB's accountability standards. By the end of this cycle, schools that meet the standards outlined in the Charter Goals policy will move forward and be continued with conditions, or renewed for another 15-year term, reinforcing our commitment to quality education and operational excellence. On this next couple of slides, I will talk about the difference between reviewing a charter and renewing a charter. So there's a critical difference between reviews and renewals. During a review, the board has discretion to continue a school, even if the school did not meet its goals or is non-compliant. However, during a renewal, the board does not have this discretion. It must not renew a school that did not meet its goals or is non-compliant. It's worth noting that the board never has discretion if it finds that a school did not meet the financial performance expectations. The board must revoke a school's charter or not renew its charter in this instance. Understanding this distinction helps clarify our oversight decisions and the criteria that we use. So let's talk a little bit more on the next slide about what we examine. In both reviews and renewals, we look at 3 main areas. First, charter goals. That is, whether the school is meeting its academic performance targets. Then compliance, or its adherence to laws, regulations, and the terms of its charter agreement. And of course, fiscal health, whether the school is financially stable and sustainable. Next slide, please. So this slide gives you an overview of the way we're evaluating academic performance during this review period. Many will recall that we are not assessing schools' academic performance in school year 2021 or school year 21-22. Those were the years that occurred during the COVID-19 pandemic and also while DC PCSB was redesigning its accountability system. So that means that this year's academic evaluation will rest on performance achieved in school years 22-23, 23-24, and 24-25. As you can see, DC PCSB provided schools with multiple pathways to demonstrate goal attainment. And I'll pause here so that you can take in all of the pathways that are available during the last 3 years of the review period. All right, let's go to the next slide. You've already heard me name a few times some of the possible outcomes of a charter review or renewal. One, of course, is continuance. That means that the school has met performance expectations and may continue operating under its charter. The next is continuance with conditions. This means that the school must meet certain standards in future years or risk closure. And then finally, there's revocation. If standards are not met or serious issues arise, the board will revoke or not renew the charter. Next slide, please. A school being approved to continue marks a significant achievement for the school, its students, staff, leadership, and trustees. It means they have met the charter standards set by DCPCSB. This approval reflects strong alignment with our accountability system and reinforces our commitment to ensuring quality education for all students. Next slide. When a school continues with conditions, we set clear performance benchmarks. If the school meets them, it remains open. And if it doesn't, the board may consider closure, grade phase out, that is, winding down distinct grades that are currently offered, or campus closure. So if it's a multi-campus school, then one or more of those campuses might close while the remaining campuses stay open. If the board moves towards revocation, we follow a transparent, multi-step process, including notice, opportunity to respond, and public hearings, ensuring due process at every stage. I'll now turn it over to our COO, Will Henderson, to discuss the financial aspect of reviews and renewals.
Thanks, Melody, and good evening to you all. So as we look at the next couple of slides, it's important that we begin considering how we review a school's financial health during the review and renewal process. You can go to the next slide. So financial health is a key component of these reviews and renewals. We are routinely assessing a school's financial health, though, even beyond just the charter review process. In that routine fiscal assessment, we are looking at an entity's economic viability. We are looking for patterns of fiscal mismanagement, and we are looking for compliance with GAAP. And inevitably, we are seeking to determine that schools have resources, a plan, and high ethical standards at all times. And you can find more about how we do that routinely through our financial analysis report technical guide and some of the prior presentations that we have done in the last year or so. So during the review or renewal cycle in particular, we look at the 5 years of data that's occurred for the period under review. During those reviews, we look at 5 years of financial statements. 4 of those financial statements have been audited. The 5th year, based on the timing of the due date of the reports, that 5th year is based on unaudited financial statements. We also take a look at the upcoming fiscal year's budget for the LEA, and then we also take into account other supporting data that we have. So we monitor our LEA's key financial indicators to evaluate their financial health. Schools, while they are not required to meet every KFI at all times, the indicators that are unfavorable during a review cycle may cause us to escalate our monitoring practices in keeping with our typical process. When as you can imagine, the review and renew cycle is a backwards looking experience, and as you might understand, an LEA's financial position could change from the timing of the financial report to the timeline that the school is up for their formal review. We have learned some lessons in through a recent cycle, and have devised a new tool to make sure that both the reports for each of our schools are aligned and consistent with one another, but there's also an opportunity to elevate key changes to a school's financial health, both changes in a negative direction or changes in a positive direction. So each of our schools starting this year will have a corresponding memo that is not a part of the review report, but will be here and present for our board to consider and for the public to have access to regarding any material changes or notable changes to the school's financial position since the close of the review report itself, and our board will be able to utilize that information as they interrogate the school and consider whether or not they will vote in favor of a review or a renewal. This information will be public and transparent, not just to our board, but also to the public.
Good evening. My name is Carlos Silbiger, and I'm a specialist in the school performance department. I'm here to speak about public charter school governance, the important connection between governance and charter school reviews and renewals, and the ways that the DC Public Charter School Board is working to improve governance structures in service of school quality and student success. Governance is the process that schools use to make big decisions. In DC public charter schools, big decisions are made by a board of trustees acting in the best interest of the community. School boards of trustees must include a majority of district residents and at least 2 parents or students if it's an adult program. They are entrusted with important decisions about how public money will be spent, who should lead the school, what academic programs will most effectively help students learn, and how to engage with their school community. While we formally review a school's charter once every 5 years, the school's board of trustees should review the goals listed in the charter routinely throughout the year. And per the National Association of Charter School Authorizers 2023 Guide to Performance Frameworks, the quality of governance is a strong predictor of charter school success. DC PCSB and all 66 of our schools' boards of trustees have a shared role in school success. When a school opens, PCSB's board and the LEA's board have to agree on a charter, which is a contract detailing the student success benchmarks that the school intends to meet, along with a series of legal, operational, fiscal, and compliance requirements dictated by law or policy. DCPCSB provides the school's board of trustees with the autonomy to govern the school in exchange for accountability and alignment with their charter agreement. Trustees then monitor progress towards those goals. When we conduct a formal review or renewal every 5 years, we are checking in to measure their progress and determine continuance. Because trustees play such an important role in school success, especially during the review and renewal process, we have embarked on an extensive process to engage the community and seek their feedback. We are trying to determine what good governance looks like, where model governance practices throughout our sector currently exist, and how DC PCSB can highlight those practices to support trustee effectiveness. In the past year, I have interviewed trustees representing the range of experiences and school types to understand how they see their role and their relationship with DC PCSB. I have observed school board of trustees meetings to gather best practices in areas of need. I have met with professional governance trainers and other high-functioning authorizers to understand the practices that they have found most effective. And I have visited our Parent and Alumni Leadership Council to hear more about what parent leaders need from their school's board. Based on that feedback, I've worked with my colleagues to draft governance standards that will help trustees understand their role and, when implemented to fidelity, will improve governance decisions and school success. We are now using the perspectives that we gain through community engagement to prepare quality trustee training. The Board of Trustees Training Amendment Act, passed earlier this year, requires us to provide mandatory training for all trustees, 722 individuals to be exact, starting during the 2026-2027 school year. Given the important and difficult role that trustees play, our hope is that effective training could lead to more successful governance structures, especially during the review and renewal process. We are continuing to define governance standards so that the content in our training aligns with proven governance practices. We are creating guidance based on the requirements in the legislation so that school leaders and trustees are clear on the expectations, requirements, and processes. We are currently working to select a learning management system that will help us deliver quality training content to all trustees. And most excitingly, Chair Wright, Treasurer Stanley Beatty, and Dr. Walker Davis conducted a discussion with school chairs, academic committee chairs, and treasurers to explore governance priorities. That dialogue served as a foundation for 3 optional training sessions held this year, designed to refine content and gather trustee feedback ahead of implementing the mandated training in school year 2026-27. We hosted the first such session earlier this month with more than 100 trustees in attendance and received overwhelmingly positive feedback. The next training will occur early in 2026 and focus on the School Board of Trustees' role in academic accountability, aligned with the review and renewal process. And with that, I believe all of us are available to answer questions.
Thank you all for this presentation. Secretary Adamafania, to kick us off.
Yes, thank you so much, Chair Wright. And again, thank you, team, for putting this presentation together. I think it really thoroughly lays out the work ahead. A question for you all: how will families be informed about review and renewal decisions prior to the My School DC lottery deadline? And what communication improvements are planned for this?
Thanks for that question. The timing is really critical here. We'll begin this year's reviews and renewals in January rather than March, as we did last school year. And this enables the board to make any non-continuance or non-renewal decision before the My School DC deadlines hit. So this timing also ensures that families have accurate information when choosing a school. And then from a communication standpoint, I note that PCSB staff works pretty frequently with the My School DC team, and we'll keep them informed so that their website accurately reflects the charter schools that will be available in the coming school year. And then I'll also note that, as we've historically done, DC PCSB staff and consultants will work directly with families of closing schools to support them with their search for a new school in the next school year if we do have schools that close at the end of this school year.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And my second question is around shifts in the review and renewal process. How will the new shifts in the process, the review and renewal process, improve transparency and accountability for schools and families?
So I had already mentioned that we have refined the review and renewal reporting template for this school year, and I believe that it's going to have a worthwhile impact regarding transparency and accountability for schools and families. As a staff member, we've already started to draft reports, and I will tell you that as I'm reviewing them now, I find them to be better aligned with the standard for continuance and also easier to digest. And so I suspect that school leaders will have a similar experience when they review our report. And I'm encouraged also by our decision to invite school leaders to provide an optional response to the report to detail their performance over the review period and sort of add color to PCSB staff's findings. So I think both of those things will improve the way we communicate and what we discuss about schools' performance during the review.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chair Wright. Those are my two questions.
Secretary, Admin, Treasurer Stanley Beatty.
Thank you, Chair Wright. Will, I just had two questions for you related to our financial oversight. The first one is that you mentioned that schools are not required to meet every KFI at all times. Talk a little bit about what that looks like in practice as it relates to oversight.
Thanks for the question, Treasurer Stanley Beatty. So the KFIs are indicators. They are telling us a bit about the story of what's happening at an LEA. So an indicator could change or look um, less positive if you are in a season of intentional change or growth. You may strategically have less cash at your fingertips while you are renegotiating terms or while you're building a building. That doesn't mean that you're in financial despair necessarily, right? However, those indicators do help the staff here at PCSB probe on the right things and making sure that you are in fact thoughtfully planning around the management of your resources. So the indicators help us, dig essentially to say, hey, what's going on here? And frequently our schools have thoughtful, clear, strategic answers to various KFI shifts, both below our floor or our target. Certainly, over time, we are not expecting schools to have challenges in their KFIs, from over several years, and that would be an exception to the rule when that does occur. When you talk about what we do use the KFI information for, our key financial indicators are to ascertain whether or not we need to elevate our monitoring. So if you've got a KFI that is below our established target, that doesn't have a strategic enough plan or does create some vulnerabilities in our assessment of your budget or your future years, we would might move you through our oversight process. This session is about reviews and renewals, but sessions that we have led in the past talk about what it means to go onto the monitoring list or to move to a financial corrective action plan, for example. So those things can occur anytime. They do not need to occur during the review and renewal cycle. Of course, if you are on the monitoring list or if you are subject to an FCAP, those are things that the review team takes into account, and the team, the staff that are responsible for review of the school's finances have an opportunity in that section, that third section of the review report, to speak about what a given school is, where they stand in our review process.
Thank you for that, Will. And I think it's important to highlight that depending on where an LEA is in our monitoring or in our oversight process, there is some flexibility with KFIs depending on where they are. But if they're, for example, in an FCAP or, like you said, on our monitoring list, perhaps there's less flexibility, right? And increased monitoring. So that just sort of speaks to the ongoing process that you and your team are always doing in terms of making sure that we're understanding what's going on with the financial and fiscal health with our LEAs. So thank you for that. My other question, you talked about a tool that you would be using that essentially allowed you to respond to the board and also to the public as it relates to an LEA if financial indicators decline, say, for example, after the review period, but before the board vote. That is a new tool.
Yep.
Yes.
That's new this cycle. Yeah. Sorry, I was waiting for the second part of the sentence. Yeah, it's new this year. And I will say it's not just about declining financial health. You can also envision a world where a school makes meaningful changes at the start of the year and improves their fiscal health. It would be important to you as a board member to understand that as you look towards renewing an LEA.
Right. Do we have a name for the document, Will?
Um,
We should call it something.
we will
Okay.
call it something,
Call it
and I will begin reflecting on something more creative than memo, which
Than
is
memo.
currently what I'm working with.
We,
So
we can talk about it, but we
yeah.
and I'll tell you, and I know I'm catching you off guard. I'm telling you, I'll say why I'm saying that because it's important, right? Essentially, that document will bridge the gap between what we knew at any given time versus bringing us up to speed when it's time for the vote. And it's not just the board; it's also the sector, right? Because it's going to be a document, and so confirm that it's a public document, right?
That's right.
Okay.
That's correct. It'll be public for you guys and for the broader public before the meeting or before and during the meeting where an LEA is up for their review.
Right. And then the other thing that I would say, it probably is self-explanatory, but I think it does deserve just reiteration. The reason why a document like that would be so important is because things do change with LEAs, or I won't say they do, they can. They certainly can change with an LEA, like you said, for better or for worse. And so in that situation where perhaps things have evolved to the level that the board needs to know to be able to make a decision as it relates to continuance or reviews or renewals, you want to be able to provide us with that information. And so I just want to elevate that the tool that you've developed is a new one, and you're doing that in response to oversight conditions and to make sure that the board is always the board and the industry, the sector is always provided with timely information so that we're all up to speed and caught up with where an LEA may be at any particular given time.
That's right. And, I think one other thing to add is we have received feedback in the last season too about making this content like this easy to access even historically. So I do expect there will be several of our schools that there isn't anything meaningful to update. They'll still have a memo, and that memo will say something as simple as there are no noteworthy changes in the fiscal health of this fiscal standing of this organization. We're still working on the language there, but I imagine that there will be several LEAs that the report and the content that we reviewed and analyzed to bring to you in the initial draft of the review report does say the same. It's important to me that we still have an innocuous memo there so that in 5 years, when that school is back up for their next review, you can go backwards and the public won't need to scramble to look around to see, well, did the memo disappear, or was there no memo, or and so no matter what, starting this year, they'll be able to have this update memo available, even something that says that there are no notable updates.
Thank you, Will. Thank you, Chair Wright.
Board Member Crucy.
Thank you, Will, and thank you, the team, Carlo, for your part of the presentation. My question is actually, I think, is probably for you, Carlo. I'm interested in the governance role of LEA boards and the role they should be playing in ensuring compliance with conditions that may be set during reviews and renewals.
Thank you for the question. I mean, I think the most obvious one is they should know what the conditions are. I will tell you that is not always the case as I talk to board members and I go to meetings. They need to know what the conditions are. They need to understand the data behind them, and they need to be discussing them and being updated on them regularly at their meetings. I was reading the minutes of one of our LEAs just today that is under conditions right now, where at their board meeting, they actually went through all of the conditions and the staff gave an update on where they are, which ones have they met, which ones are they working on meeting, and a discussion transpired based on that. That should be happening regularly. It should never be a surprise, right? The board needs to understand it. And the last thing I'll mention is that the board should be pushing their staff to set goals for where things should be by the next quarter. What should we be seeing when we're coming back together? So this is a conversation back and forth, not just receiving information, but sharing a path to meet the conditions and holding staff accountable for that work.
That's great. Carla, I'm so thrilled that you're in your role and that I think attending the meetings from time to time, at least, is really important. Of course, just like us, LEA board members are volunteers. And I think it's really easy for the officers who have more regular interaction with the school leader and executive director that may not realize that some of these things like conditions, which are quite important to the charter, may not be widely known for other board members who aren't officers. And that it's really important that we play a role in making sure that's explicit, because each one of those board members is every bit as responsible for the health of that charter and not just the officers.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all for being here this evening and for sharing this presentation. Very helpful. I hope folks have really tuned in, particularly given that there is a review cycle that is kicking off, and appreciate the change in response to feedback that staff has worked very hard to implement so that our reviews and renewals continue to improve as we oversee accountability. So thank you all for the hard work in this. Next on our agenda, I'm going to yield the floor to Treasurer Carissa Stanley Beatty.
Thank you, Chair Wright. DCPCSB is responsible for monitoring and evaluating the financial health of every public charter LEA. During this portion of our board meeting, staff will share updates on our financial oversight activities, which could include updates to the financial monitoring list, any citations of fiscal concerns, and potential updates to ongoing financial corrective action plans, or what we call FCAPs. Staff may also use this time to offer any deeper insights into their work. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Will Henderson, our Chief Operating Officer, for this month's financial update.
Thank you, Treasurer Stanley Beatty. On October 30th, 2025, the PCSB Finance Committee met to discuss the financial status of certain LEAs, to discuss just general sector news and our financial oversight framework refinements that you all should know that we are working on in this season. While we have not issued any citations of fiscal concern nor made any changes to the financial monitoring list since the last time I was in front of you on just a few days before the Finance Committee meeting, I did want to take a moment to pause on Capitol Village. Capitol Village Public Charter Schools' August financial statements were in compliance with their FCAP, or their Financial Corrective Action Plan. However, its enrollment shortfall results in a loss of revenue of approximately $800,000. The next milestone for evaluation of compliance with their FCAP is our review of the revised FY26 budget that we received in early November. The budget review is key to our ongoing assessment of the LEA's economic viability, and we are in the midst of our latest review of this revised budget. If we determine that the LEA is no longer economically viable, we will request that the DCPCSB board vote at the next board meeting to begin the charter revocation process. And that concludes my updates at this month's financial oversight update.
Are there any questions for Will on the Finance Committee report?
Yes, Chair Wright. Will, thank you for the mention of Capitol Village. Obviously, your team is doing all the things that you're supposed to do per the FCAP and working with that LEA to make sure that we understand their current financial position as well as whatever their budget indicates to us. What are the next steps and the timeline if we find that LEA is no longer economically viable, and how might that impact students and families?
Thanks, Treasurer Stanley Beatty. So I'll go broad, and then Dr. Walker Davis, if you want to jump in on a couple of more nuances, please do. So if our economic viability assessment ascertains that this LEA is not, in fact, economically viable any longer, we would begin a process towards revocation. That process is kicked off with an initiation recommendation that comes from staff to our board. And so we initiate or we recommend an initiation for revocation. And so then that kicks off a process for where the LEA has an opportunity for public comment, where they can bring the community to speak to what is happening in their finances and respond to our recommendation. And then we'll finally come back to the board on a vote about whether or not to revoke the LEA. So that's very broad, but that kicks off a fairly lengthy process, almost all of which is happening in a public space. And so, in speaking to your question about families, they would have access to the information and the timelines that are happening there. My colleagues spoke earlier about a desire to make decisions or help the board and our community make these decisions in time for families to participate in the enrollment lottery. As we've seen in recent years, that's not always a luxury that we have, given the things that tie our hands, the policies and laws that bind us. But that is certainly our goal, and we do believe that we will be, for Capitol Village specifically, we will know enough to recommend begin the process for revocation, or to know enough to say that the school is economically viable in time for families to make those choices that they need in the enrollment season.
And thank you for that. Big picture, I think this is a good opportunity to talk about just in general, the tangible, real benefits for robust financial oversight. So for LEAs that are really looking at their financials and making sure that they are providing appropriate oversight as is required, right, but via their charter, and that we're also doing the appropriate things from an oversight perspective. How does that tangibly impact students in our charter school system? Because you think about doing all the right things, but there's a real impact on actual students, right, and on actual families that rely on our schools. So talk about how you see that.
So I see that in a few ways. So as you know, I've started the DC portion of my career in direct service to students, and this was before my time in finance. And the work that I was able to do to serve students, not only did my time cost money, but the resources that I provided for students in need and in my charge cost costs money. I mean, that's just the way of the world, money and time. And so as I in more recent years, as I managed the financial resources of an LEA, as we got stronger, we were able to invest more resources into improving the programs that we provided to those students. That could go anywhere from teacher compensation all the way over to, the clubs and sports extracurriculars that we provided to schools. In particular, when I zoom out and think about if I am a school that had a challenging year academically, you don't, I mean, blood, sweat, and tears goes a long way, but sometimes you need a different type of resources, creative resources, short-term resources to be able to support the challenges that come your way. And they may be academic challenges, they may just be the challenges that exist in the community, safety challenges. Security and safety was a part of my portfolio at one time. And as neighborhoods evolve, you may need to have some short-term resources. If you've got the financial health to do that, then you can pivot to meet any given moment that you have. If you don't have resources, then you have to be more strategic and may have to make sacrifices. And our school leaders know that, what it's like to make those hard decisions, and do a great job with that the vast majority of the time. And so we want to create an environment where their physical health can help them meet the moment that they have signed up to serve through their charter.
Treasurer Stanley Beatty, I think I heard in your question, maybe implied sort of what is the role of the board, of the LEA's board in supporting the ability for the school to do that. And I would go back to Carlo's part of the presentation where he spoke to not only is the contract held between our two respective boards, but the responsibility of that governing entity to, if done well, that the board is going to have much more insight into the financial conditions of the school prior to PCSB doing the look back and the review. And so I think what your question makes me think about is what is the role of that board in supporting the leader in allocating resources to the places that they believe is important for their school community, paying attention to the resources that are available to do the things that Will spoke about. But ultimately, the board should be looking for signs and having the first indication of the direction of the school's health and making those critical decisions before PCSB has to intervene and ratchet up consequences associated with that. So I think it's both about what's possible with the resources, but what I heard in your question was also what is the role of the trustees in ensuring that they can do what their charter says and what their community is looking to them to be able to support their leader in doing.
No, thank you for that, Dr. Walker Davis. I think you're both exactly right. It's oftentimes not oftentimes, it is a heavy lift that we ask of our trustees because it's a volunteer position, right? But we cannot overstate the importance of the role and all of the different hats that trustees have to wear, and the financial oversight, robust and true financial oversight has to be critical in terms of a trustee's role, because that is indeed how a school is able to offer programming and any other thing that it wants to offer, right? Is the financial support undergirds the academic programming. And so you can't divorce those two. Thank you, Chair Wright.
Well, for your presentation. Next, we'll vote on the consent calendar. Would any board member like to remove an item from the calendar for further discussion or state a recusal for the record?
Yes, Chair Wright, I am recused from my matters related to Basis DC.
Okay, thank you, Chair Crucy. So this vote will not include Member Crucy because of her recusal. So colleagues, I'll now entertain a motion on the consent calendar.
I move to approve all items on the consent calendar.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right. Secretary Adamafania, can you please call roll excluding Board Member Crucy?
Chair Wright.
Aye.
Vice Chair Sandman.
Aye.
Treasurer Stanley Beatty.
Aye.
And Chair Wright, I'm an aye as well.
All right, consent calendar passes. Thank you. There is one item the board is reading into the record tonight, the summary of charter school procurement contracts over $25,000 from July 1st through September 30th. There's no action needed, but we did want to read that into the record. Is there any new business? All right, seeing none, colleagues, I will now entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn the November 17th, 2025 board meeting.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right. Secretary Adamafania, please call roll.
Chair Wright.
Aye.
Vice Chair Sandman.
Aye.
Treasurer Stanley Beatty.
Aye.
Board Member Crucy.
Aye.
And I am an aye as well, Chair.
All right. Thank you all. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday. And this meeting is adjourned. Thank you for joining us. Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.